So the same way we're going to get inspiration, insights from surfers, the surfing community, we're also going to learn from the freediving community. Freedivers is a group of athletes, humans, whose sport consists of diving very deep into the ocean, covering many laps underwater in swimming pools, and holding their breath for many, many minutes. What allows them to do these amazing challenges, these amazing feats, is the fact that through years of practice, freedivers develop a very smart body-mind connection, very smart body-mind interaction. They are artists at playing with thoughts, choosing different perspectives, choosing the most empowering responses to particular sensations or emotions they could be feeling, which allows them to be very smart with the use of oxygen and energy underwater. Now we are going to analyze a couple of freediving videos, with the objective of getting some nice information, some nice insights from this community. So we are starting with the first one. This first video was filmed in Bahamas many years ago in a place called Dean's Blue Hole. And in the video, freediver William Trubridge is going to attempt and actually achieve a world record dive. William is going to dive to 101 meters in a discipline known by freedivers as constant weight no fins. In the video, William is laying flat on the surface of the ocean, breathing with the objective to enter an ideal mental state for his dive. He takes a lot of air before he goes down, flips over, and his dive starts. At the beginning of his dive, his lungs are fully expanded. That's why he floats a lot. That's why he needs to move with a bit more frequency and more power, otherwise flotation will take him back to surface. However, the deeper he goes, the higher the water pressure, the smaller the lungs start to become, which means he starts to lose flotation. Now you can notice how there is more space, longer time in between arm strokes and kicks. He's floating less and less. And eventually enters the zone where he can actually start free falling. Once the lungs are so small that he doesn't float anymore, the smart thing to do is to stop moving and let gravity do the work of going down for you. So basically William is being smart with his oxygen and energy by stopping his actions. Right now, all his focus is in keeping his head in the right place and of course dealing with the building water pressure by equalizing his ears and sinuses. He's wearing a nose clip, plus has the skill to equalize hands-free. That's why he can keep his arms on the side. And now all his efforts, like mentioned a few seconds ago, are in keeping his mind in the right place. The total duration of the dive is around 4 minutes. Imagine for the average human to hold a breath without movement for 4 minutes is a huge challenge. In this case, he's not only holding the breath for that time, but also going down to 101 meters, turning around and swimming back to surface. Believe me when I tell you that this is a very challenging dive for William. Proof of this is the fact that a few years after this dive, and he's a full-time athlete, he attempted a dive to 102 meters, basically overcome his own record by 1 meter, and he didn't make it. Don't worry, William is still alive. But point is, that shows us that it's a proof that the dive he's doing right now is going to expose him to his mental and physical limits. Nevertheless, I want you to notice the control with which he's going to behave for the whole duration of the dive. At no point you're going to see him look up to see how many meters are left to finish the dive. At no point you're going to see him rush because he's getting desperate to get to surface. Basically, he's behaving very solidly. He's behaving in complete control of himself. even in the presence of extreme physical discomfort. Because believe me when I tell you, right now he's feeling like a very strong urge to breathe. So very likely he's feeling fatigue in arms and legs. Nevertheless, he's choosing to remain in complete control of himself. So right now, this is living proof that it is possible for a human to develop the skill to acquire the adaptations that allows a person to stay in complete control of him or herself, even in the presence of extreme physical discomfort. This is the most important point I want you guys to take from this video. As he approaches surface, safety divers start to follow him because the last meters of a dive are the most challenging parts of the dive. And also notice how, as he approaches surface and his lungs re-expand, he starts floating more and more. He breaks surface, and now he has a few seconds to follow a protocol, basically recover, take his goggles off, nose clip off, and says that he is okay. He needs to follow this protocol to validate his dive. Not sure if you noticed that his head was a little bit shaky, which is a sign of low oxygen. Which again proves one more time that he exposed himself to a challenge that put him basically in his mental and physical limits. So now that we've looked to William's dive and analyzed it to some extent, we're going to break it down into like smaller stages, smaller pieces, to get even more information from the dive. Not all of this information is directly usable for a surfer, but it's still interesting to know. So this is a little bit what a free dive could look like. Now we have the surface of the ocean, a buoy, a float, and a line, and I've drawn dotted lines every 10 meters. And over here, we have a free diver preparing for his dive. As you know, over the surface of the planet, we have 1 atmospheric pressure, or basically the weight of air acting on us. As you also know, water is heavier than air, so it only takes 10 meters of water, roughly, to equal 1 atmosphere, which means that at 10 meters depth, there are going to be 2 atmospheres. At 20 meters, 3, at 30 meters, 4, and so forth. This freediver is aware of this, and he knows that the moment he takes the last breath and starts his dive, water pressure will start increasing. But he's not worried because most of the human body is water, and water are good friends. However, he needs to be worried about the air spaces inside the human body. The one we're going to talk about now, to keep things simple, are the lungs. Okay? For your knowledge, an adult male, roughly on a full inhalation, will have a volume of air inside of around 6 to 8 liters. Let's go for 8 to make our numbers, our demonstration example a little bit simpler. So this freediver on a full inhalation will start his dive with lungs at a volume of 8 liters. Okay, 8-liter lungs to start the dive. His dive begins. He reaches 10 meters depth, where pressure doubles. You have 1 atmosphere of air plus 1 atmosphere of water. Pressure doubles, which means lung size will be divided in 2. It's going to be reduced to half. So suddenly his lung volume becomes 4 liters. But he doesn't stop, he keeps going down, reaches 20 meters depth, meaning the lungs are going to become a third of the original volume, meaning 2.6 liter lungs. He doesn't stop there, he keeps going, reaches 30 meters or 4 atmospheres, where his lungs will eventually reach a volume of 2 liters. Interesting fact it is that back in the days, 1950s, 60s, science used to believe that if a human being went beyond 40-50 meters, the individual would die, because the negative pressure in the chest cavity would be so large that we would implode. or our soft tissues around this area would simply get destroyed by the negative pressure. But luckily that doesn't happen. Humans proved that they could actually go beyond this depth, return to surface, and they were okay. So what allows a human to reach such extreme depths and be safe and be okay and be able to come back to surface and be alive is something we're going to talk about later. For now, the main thing you need to focus on is that when a human on full lungs goes down, lung size starts to reduce. And with a reduction in lung volume comes a reduction in flotation. Okay? Because for an object to float, it needs to displace a weight of fluid equal or greater than its own weight. So if the lungs, the air in the human being is getting smaller and smaller, eventually this person will start floating less and less. Because freedivers are smart and they know about this, they know that once their lungs get to a certain volume, they will start sinking. And that's how they know that at a certain depth they can stop moving and gravity will do the rest of the work for them. And luckily, when they return to surface, the opposite happens. Their lungs start re-expanding, which allows them to float as they return back to surface. Why do I mention this? I know that you as surfers are not going to go to extreme depths. I know that most of the time wipeouts happen a meter, 2 meters below the surface, maybe further if it's an extreme big wave. But most of the time your wipeouts are quite close to the surface. So why then do I tell you about these sort of changes in lung volume? The main thing I want you to take from this is like big lungs with a greater volume of air float more than lungs with a lesser volume of air. And later in the course, when we enter the breathing exercises, I am going to teach you how to take proper full inhalations. Something like this. Why this? Why learn to take proper full inhalations? Because every once in a while, you're going to be facing a scenario in the ocean where you might feel helpless, where you usually feel panicked, where you have no cards to play. Huge wave is coming and there's nowhere to run, no jet ski to rescue you, no channel to escape to. And whilst before you used to like panic and feel helpless, now you possibly are aware that you have the ability to take a proper full breath, which is going to help you float more. All right? That's an interesting thing we can take from freedivers. If I have lungs with a bigger volume of air, I float more. I am aware that a surfer not always has the time to take proper full inhalations. But whenever you find this window within your, let's say, the challenge you could be facing in the ocean, be aware that inside us we have an inflatable vest and that we can tap into it if we feel we need it, and of course if we have the time. Another thing we can take from this video is the following. Did you notice how in William's dive the safety divers followed him in the last meters of the dive? Reason behind is like the last meters of a free dive is the most dangerous part of the dive. Reason behind is lungs start to re-expand, meaning the pressure of gases inside starts reducing, okay, as the diver returns back to surface. So, how do gases move in nature? Gases move in nature always from high to low pressure. That is why if someone forgets to close the kitchen, seconds later someone can smell it in the living room. Or why if someone walks into a room holding a cup of coffee, seconds later someone can smell coffee. So, let's say if I have oxygen, vital gas, in my lungs, this oxygen will find it much easier to jump into my blood and eventually to my tissues and organs if it's at high pressure. That is why if a free diver starts his dive, let's say he has 4 molecules of oxygen, the deeper he goes and the smaller the lungs become, the higher the pressure of this gas. the closer these molecules become, meaning oxygen becomes super available, very easily available when the body is at depth. However, the opposite happens when the freediver returns to surface and lungs start re-expanding, because with every meter that the freediver approaches surface and lungs re-expand, oxygen pressure starts being reduced. And the most radical change in pressure happens in the last 10 meters, where lungs double in size, meaning that whatever oxygen was remaining will be divided in two. That is why the name shallow water blackout usually happens in shallow waters. I know that you as surfers are not going to be exposed to big changes in pressure. Nevertheless, another benefit of learning how to take a full inhalation whenever you have the time, plus feel the need to, is that not only is it going to help you float quicker back to surface, but also is going to put a higher oxygen reserve in your lungs at a higher pressure, which means that oxygen will start getting pumped into your blood faster and for longer. I am aware that as surfers we are rarely exposed to low oxygen in a regular surf session, but nevertheless it is one more card we can play whenever we feel challenged, whenever we feel the need to.